In this video, we see a seemingly intelligent man attempting to teach Hovind something about speed of light. Appearances can be deceptive, and you can expect this man to engage in either deceit or utter ignorance, depending on how easy you attribute malice. So let us begin.
Hello, Mr. Hovind. I'm King Crocoduck, and I'm going to try to help you to understand science.
So, question, is Einstein's relativity theory accurate? Particularly, is the speed of light truly constant? And does this hurt a young Earth theory? Mitch, as far as his theory being accurate, I don't know. People argue both sides of that issue, but...
No, Kent. There's no controversy in academia as to whether or not special relativity is accurate.
Did you catch that? Replay.
As far as his theory being accurate, I don't know. People argue both sides of that issue, but...
No, Kent. There's no controversy in academia.
People argue both sides of that issue, but...
There's no controversy in academia. There's no controversy in academia.
King Crocoduck cannot even get one sentence of Hovind right. While to many, changing people to academicians may not seem a big deal, there is perhaps a reason why atheists and evolutionists do it. Authority is amazing, and everyone likes to have it, because it makes it easier to press your case without a reasoned defense. New atheists and evolutionists, like feminists, Marxists, and social justice warriors, recognize that capturing the positions of authority and controlling what may be called people in the pulpit may help advance their agenda. People have huge faith in intelligentsia, which is waiting to be exploited, and men in lab coats and in social science classes control what next generation is taught. Hence, there is an attempt to delegitimize opponents in these fields. Crocoduck himself has a video wherein he talks about the truth about creationist PhDs. You can expect that video to be nothing but mud shots, but more on that in another video. There is a class divide that such attempts to create. A class divide similar to what was when a preacher preached to a choir, which atheists and individualists decried, and yet they attempt to create a similar class, because the outrage perhaps was not against the absurdity of authority, but only the conclusions the authority was reaching. Intellectuals and their so-called puppets want to control the debate and the social scenario. The normal pleb is treated as dirt, an ignorant man who needs to be taught. His views should align with those of high priests. They dictate truth and in many cases the moral right. Here's an excellent video of David Berlinski explaining this.
That if nature is accessible only to mathematicians because it's written in the language of mathematics, then it follows that the mathematicians must form something like a priestly class. A second corollary follows at once. Of what good is it to have a priestly class if in fact the class is telling us exactly what we ordinarily think? That is impossible. So not only is the book of nature accessible only to a certain class of professionals, it contains secrets and mysteries that the rest of us must find inscrutable. These are necessary corollaries. And in the year 2012, there is a massive sense of entitlement in the American European scientific community with respect to the book of God's work. If you have views about physical reality and you're not a member of the priestly class, you may as well keep it to yourself. And if you do venture into criticism because you find a doctrine absurd, aberrant, or simply ridiculous, be prepared for the full weight of an inquisition to fall on your shoulders. Be prepared.
King Crocoduck seemingly wants to dip his hands into it to lash the arrows of impeccable arguments at King, ignoring that he did so by changing a word of what he said. Even in a comfy video response, he does not even get what he wants to disprove stated accurately, or maybe he does not want to. Yet it is not just plebs that are being mocked by self-identified intellectuals. Atheists have gone on diatribe against philosophers owing of a revival of theism in religion and philosophy, the same atheists who swooned over David Hume decades ago. There is an excellent video by a lifelong atheist that shows Cross struggling to understand why he needs philosophy.
Hello, Mr. Hovind. I'm King Crocoduck, and I'm going to try to help you to understand science.
So, question, is Einstein's relativity theory accurate? Particularly, is the speed of light truly constant? And does this hurt a young Earth theory? Mitch, as far as his theory being accurate, I don't know. People argue both sides of that issue, but...
No, Kent. There's no controversy in academia as to whether or not special relativity is accurate. We know that special relativity works because it predicts results with stupendous accuracy. Two central features of special relativity are time dilation and length contraction, which follow naturally and inevitably from the two postulates of special relativity, that the laws of physics are the same in all inertial reference frames, and that the speed of light is the same in all inertial reference frames. If you start with these two postulates, these two equations will necessarily follow. These equations make testable predictions that have been vindicated time and time again. We know that time dilation and length contraction take place because there are a plethora of examples that demonstrate this.
If King Crocoduck was even as smart as a person claims to criticize, he would have known that he just committed fallacy of affirming the consequent. But hey, guess, science need no philosophy. This is what Kent, who seems to be an edge above Crocoduck, and quite a few scientists, has to say.
Now, it's always amazed me how two people can look at the same thing and come to opposite conclusions of what they are seeing. Two people can look at Grand Canyon. One of them believes in evolution. He looks at the canyon and says, wow, look what the Colorado River did for millions and millions of years. The Bible-believing Christian stands there, looks at the same canyon, and says, wow, look what the flood did in about 30 minutes. Now, how was that canyon formed anyway? This textbook says over millions of years, the Colorado River has carved the Grand Canyon from solid rock. Now just slow down a minute. Kids, it is a fact Grand Canyon exists. How many have been to Grand Canyon? I taught Earth Science, studied Grand Canyon avidly. I like Grand Canyon. Beautiful place. Big hole in the ground. Now there are two interpretations of how it got there. The evolutionists have an interpretation, and so do the creationists. The evolutionist is going to tell you that canyon formed slowly by a little bit of water and lots of time. Millions of years. The creationist is going to tell you, oh, the canyon formed quickly by lots of water and a little bit of time. The guys who believe in evolution are continually trying to erase the line between their interpretation and the fact column, and they want you to somehow think that what they interpret as evidence is now part of the fact.
True that length contraction and time dilation has been proved. At this point, they can be said to be facts. They do not prove theory of relativity in a similar way that this argumentation does not work. Men are mortal. My dog Fluff is mortal. Fluff is a man. Crocoduck realizes this. That is why he changes another word. The question that was asked to Kent involved words like accurate and true, which refer to ontological reality. Listen.
So, question, is Einstein's relativity theory accurate? Particularly, is the speed of light truly constant? And does this hurt a young Earth theory? Mitch, as far as his theory being accurate, I don't know. So, question, is Einstein's relativity theory accurate? Particularly, is the speed of light truly constant? And does this hurt a young Earth theory? Mitch.
We know that special relativity works because it predicts results with stupendous accuracy. We know that special relativity works because it predicts results with stupendous accuracy.
Accurate. Truly
works
King Crocoduck criticizes that by saying that special relativity works. That is pragmatism. Listen.
We know that special relativity works because it predicts results with stupendous accuracy.
Newtonian classical mechanics also worked up to a point, and then it did not work. Yet even when it worked, it was not true, in a sense referring to reality. King Crocoduck seems to be exactly that man who would be laughing at quantum mechanics, plate tectonics, and would be one of the 100 scientists against relativity. Here is a recommendation of a book to show how similar facts can be accommodated by a number of theories. Even if you disagree with Lorentzian interpretation and the idea of an existent God, It's a good read, especially the part by William Lane Craig. King Crocoduck is brilliantly strawmanning Kent when making a video response to him. He cannot even critique the actual sentences and answer questions. It is up to you to think whether this is just a mistake or actual deceit.
The speed of light, I think it's been well demonstrated, is not necessarily a constant. If it is a constant today in one medium, such as the atmosphere or in space around us, does that mean it's been constant all through history? Does that mean it's been constant in all mediums?
Okay, stop right there. Nobody says that light is constant in all media. The speed of light in a vacuum is different from the average speed of light through water, glass, and other media, and this has been known since at least 1850, and quite possibly even earlier. But this doesn't imply that light speed isn't constant. Identical media will yield identical speeds, and the vacuum of space is pretty much the same everywhere, so light traveling from one end of the universe to the other doesn't change its speed if it doesn't encounter some other medium.
Strawmanning Crocoduck is attempting to allude strawman to Kent's statement. It confirms a suspicion that he does not know even a little bit of philosophy. A strawman would occur if Kent implied that scientists or evolutionists say the light is constant everywhere. He does not. He is just asking whether it follows that if speed of light is constant in one medium, to which Crocoduck agrees, that light speed should be constant in all mediums, which it is not. Here the simple answer would suffice. No, which would also indicate that just because we believe in attribution of constancy of things does not mean they are such. Crocoduck assumes Kent does not know refraction, which may be true, but which is the important point or lesson here. Constancy visible in one set of systems may not be reproducible on changing the system. This may involve time too. And King Crocoduck has a brilliant response to it. Listen.
In any case, there's absolutely no evidence to indicate that the speed of light in a vacuum isn't constant. In any case, there's absolutely no evidence to indicate that the speed of light in a vacuum isn't constant. In any case, there's absolutely no evidence to indicate that the speed of light in a vacuum isn't constant.
No evidence against variation in speed of light, hence speed of light is constant. Is this what you call argument from ignorance? King Crocoduck has changed his position to fit in his dogma. Now he does not need a proof to prove things, but a proof against the negation, because he ain't want no burden of proof. This brilliant scientific response hinges on the assumption of Crocoduck, and he wants to munch it on faith. Until his Bible is proven to be false, he sure will believe in it. King Crocoduck exemplifies a true skeptic, a true convenient skeptic that is.
There's stuff on the internet. Princeton University back 15 years ago speeded light up to 300 times the speed of light. And I covered that in video number 7, I believe, question answer session. I haven't even seen them in 10 years myself, but it's up, I think it's number 7. They've also slowed light down to, they had it down to 38 mile an hour, and I heard that while I was in prison, some physics laboratories slowed light down to a dead stop.
This second objection is rather dull. Hovind clearly looks like he's just repeating something he heard and acknowledges that. Crocoduck interestingly criticizes Hovind for believing in something which media wrongly represented, which is kind of funny when you look at the stuff that was wrong or deceitful remaining in textbooks under nose of evolutionists for decades. An example in Ernest Haeckel's drawing. It is funny that evolutionists still think that it was not that bad. This article written at the behest of Jerry Cohen defends Haeckel's fraud by statements like that his lectures were meant for a popular audience, and thus some didactic license would have been permitted. For Haeckel was a marine biologist, not a vertebra biologist. It criticizes the people who criticized Haeckel as his enemies, and calls Haeckel as a man of great genius and driving passion. At times, Haeckel's impulsive energy led him astray, and he gave his opponents some cause for their complaints. Funnily, the article also calls his frauds or intentional errors as stumble. However, leave that. Check Crocodile's own reference. Read what he didn't, though he shows it on the screen. Information coded using a light pulse cannot be transmitted faster than C using this effect. Hence, it is still true to say that information carried by a light pulse cannot be transmitted faster than C. The detailed reasons are very complex and still under debate. Can this debate be about the debate about special relativity, aka about whether some information can exceed speed of light? Important point to consider, though largely irrelevant here.
From my understanding, absolutely not. The speed of light is not necessarily a constant, and you cannot tell the age of the universe based on some star that they say is 17.296 billion light years away.
We don't use stars to determine the age of the universe. We use the cosmic microwave background radiation.
complete misunderstanding of what Hovind says. Hovind there means, and it is extremely easy to see what, that if light from a star 10 billion light years away reaches Earth, and speed of light is constant, which Hovind believes is not, and King Crocoduck takes it on faith, making Hovind skeptic and Crocoduck dogmatic, then Earth would be at least 10 billion years old. This puts a lower limit on Earth's age, a concept which Hovind understands, and King Crocoduck pretends not to understand, perhaps, or does not understand, but just merely criticizes Kent's views by wildly guessing what his views are. But you will notice King Crocoduck understands that later in the video. Strange.
Whose power spectrum we measure using satellites situated in special orbits that allow them to survey the entire sky. This allows us to determine the Hubble constant, which we then use to determine the age of the universe via Hubble's law. Velocity equals Hubble's constant times distance. Dividing both sides by Hubble's constant, and then dividing both sides by velocity, we find that distance divided by velocity is the inverse of the Hubble constant. Well, distance divided by velocity is time, so the age of the universe equals 1 divided by Hubble's constant. The Hubble constant has a value of about 71 kilometers per megaparsec seconds. A megaparsec is 3.0857 times 10 to the 19 kilometers, so converting, we find that the Hubble constant is 2.3 times 10 to the negative 18 inverse seconds. Plugging this into Hubble's law, we find that the universe has been around for 4.3478 times 10 to the 17 seconds, which is equal to about 13.8 billion years. Voila! We've just found the age of the universe.
Yeah, if that was so easy, everybody would be a scientist. Hubble's value is determined by many ways, one of which is indeed by measuring distance of stars. Hubble parameter is a parameter that connects the outward radial velocity of an object in the universe, like a galaxy, with the distance of it. Like for a balloon that is being inflated, the velocity of a point on the balloon depends on its position. This measure actually requires measuring the distance of galaxies and stars, while the velocity is measured by observing redshifts. King Crocoduck dishonestly conceals this fact. It is right, while the optical measurement is not the only way to measure Hubble constant, it is indeed one of the ways. There are other ways. Let us talk about one that Crocoduck discusses, using power spectrum. Yes, we can measure it using satellite and perhaps accurately, getting the curve we fit it on theory and get values of parameters. As the curve shape and values vary with the change in value of Hubble constant, knowing the actual curve can potentially help us to know the value of Hubble constant. One can simply plot the curves for different values of the constant and see which curve fits in with the observed curve the best. The constant used to draw that curve would be actual Hubble constant, right? Wrong. It isn't that simple. There are other parameters in the equation whose values alter the curve too, and until we know those values accurately, we cannot fit the curve because more than one curve can appear as a significant fit. For that, we need to know geometry of universe accurately, and only that, to fit the curve we posit dark energy. Did Crocoduck tell you that? The funny thing about all this is that even granting all this, the power spectrum curve itself is dependent on underlying theory. Cosmic inflation, for example, Ken disagrees with the current theory about origin of the universe, so King Crocoduck's efforts end up in vain. He ends up strawmanning Kent because of his ignorance, because Kent refuses the theory that underlies the power spectrum method. For him, the results are rejected too.
A. We cannot measure those distances, and I cover that in video number 7, the starlight distances, the parallax trigonometry. How could you possibly know how far away that is? How? It's just not possible. So I cover that in video 7.
Well, Kent, parallax is only one of several means by which we can measure an object's distance. While parallax can only be used on relatively nearby objects due to constraints in our ability to resolve more distant objects,
So you agree that we cannot measure these distances by parallax?
other methods allow us to measure objects that are much farther away. For example, if you want to measure intergalactic distances, the distances of the farthest and thus the oldest objects in the universe, the best way to do that is with a standard candle. It works like this. Luminous objects have a quantifiable feature called brightness, of which there are 2 types. Apparent brightness, which is a measure of how bright something appears from Earth, and absolute brightness, which is a measure of how bright something actually is.
No. The absolute brightness is the apparent brightness if the object was 10 parsecs away. A minor point, but go on reading that of Google. You obviously don't know how the equation is derived.
We can use these 2 types of brightness to determine the distance to any astronomical object. Just put the absolute brightness here and the apparent brightness here, and you'll end up with the distance to the object.
Yes, only if we assume that the medium between the star, which is billions of light years away, and us remains same, aka the brightness reduced per inch of the distance is constant. But hey, who cares? If our assumption is wrong, and there be some medium in the distant space, some form of interstellar dust, such that the brightness of light reduces even by 1% for each light year, the time scale we have will be a lot different and a lot smaller than what we currently have. The time that it takes for the light's beam to reach us becomes far lower than what appears to us. Actually, almost zero.
A Type 1a supernova, a type of standard candle, has a well-defined absolute brightness, which is why it's called a standard candle.
Wow, and what is the absolute brightness?
When a Type 1a supernova is at its peak, we know that its absolute brightness has a value of about negative 19.2.
How convenient, we know the value and you surely want to tell us how, right?
It's at this point in time when you want to measure how bright it appears from Earth, at which point you can plug both values into the distance modulus equation and determine how far away it is. Using this method, we found objects billions of light years away, and since they're billions of light years away, it took billions of years for the light from those objects to reach us.
Before discussing about galaxies, let us discuss about stars. The absolute brightness of a star is measured using luminosity of a star, which is measured using temperature and radius of a star. We can perhaps know the temperature of a star from the color of the star, because temperature and color of light emitted both are related to frequency. But how do we know radius of the star? Oh yes, from the luminosity of the star, which is calculated from the distance of the star. Such a nice circle, Darwin must be proud. How do we know luminosity of a supernova? Well, we assume that the luminosity of a type 1a supernova is constant because that is what we have found on observation of such supernova at known distances. Such, though, may not be true. In fact, Walter Baade found out that the distant Cepheid stars, which were used as standard candles, were of different type than the Cepheid stars close by. His observation showed that the earlier model was wrong by 100% in predicting the distance to distant stars because of wrong brightness. The distant stars were later classified as population 2, and that is different from the population 1 of the Cepheid stars, which were used as standard candles even for the Cepheid stars that were distant. Not only that, a supernova explosion SN 2003 FG, believed to be type 1a supernova, had non-standard live current brightness and were discarded as an exception.
Secondly, we don't know the speed of light's always been consistent.
Kent, there is no evidence that the speed of light in a vacuum has ever changed. So just for fun, let's consider some of the consequences of a universe in which the speed of light changed in such a way as to accommodate the creationist narrative. According to the Big Bang Theory, about 380,000 years after the initial expansion, the universe had expanded and cooled sufficiently to allow electrons to get captured by atoms and thus decrease the density of matter in the universe, which allowed photons to start moving freely without being scattered off of the cloud of electrons that had previously occupied the entire cosmos. The photons scattered off of this huge cloud of electrons one final time before heading off in every direction, including ours, and we can see this last scattering surface today. These photons, according to the theory, have been traveling for about 13.8 billion years. According to Hovind, these photons could not have been traveling for more than 6,000 years, which means that light must have changed its speed in order to give the illusion that the universe is at least 13.8 billion years old because, well, reasons.
And here we see how King Crocoduck builds a narrative to fit his agenda. He has no justification to prove his claim, an assumption that speed of light is constant, so it shifts the burden of the proof. But how he does it? When a holy water seller sells his stuff claiming that it is magic because his target audience believes in it. King Crocoduck does the reverse because his audience discredits magic. So if he can show that something appears magical, he does not need to prove it because his credulous audience will connect that thing with their inherent trust and hatred towards magic and accept the unjustified assertion like a gullible man grabs up a slot in a Ponzi scheme. He frames a mere possibility of speed of light not being constant to intentionality. Look at the way he frames the sentence. Why would speed of light intentionally? He uses active voice with light as subject. Change its speeds to deceive unbelievers. See how he defines the aim. To give the illusion that the universe is at least 13.8 billions of years old. The image of a crystal ball reader reinforces the idea. And yeah, shame by playing psychology, Crossy. Imagine a completely naturalistic scenario where speed of light is variant and depending on extraneous factors. That does not give an illusion of 13.8 billions of years of age. It just happens to be at a value which gives this age because you assume that it should be constant. Look how Crocoduck believes that it is almost given that we should assume the speed of light to be a constant without any significant proof. And if reality disagrees, then it is the fault of the reality, then it must somehow be giving illusions. Illusions occur in senses of perception. If you have faulty assumptions to begin with, there are no illusions. It is just you who is wrong. Let's play the game of King Crocoduck. There are 131.4 million births per year and 55.3 million deaths, which is about 76.1 million net increase per year in population. The population of the world is 7.6 billion, which is about 7,600 million. This means that about 100 years since the first man, right? I mean, why would these rates change to give an illusion of a 100-year age? Magic?
This would mean that on average, light used to travel 2.3 million times faster than it does today, since Hovind's universe is younger than the real universe by a factor of about 2.3 million. Now, what Kent doesn't seem to realize is that in order to change the speed of light, you need to change some other fundamental constants. These are the vacuum permittivity and vacuum permeability constants. The permittivity constant, or the electric constant, can loosely be thought of as a parameter that tells us how easily electric fields move through a vacuum. The permeability constant, or the magnetic constant, can loosely be thought of as a parameter that tells us how easily magnetic fields move through a vacuum. It should make intuitive sense, then, that the speed of light is dependent upon these two numbers. Since light is a disturbance passing through electric and magnetic fields, it makes sense that the speed of this disturbance should depend on how easily these fields can move. Using basic algebra, we can see that in our universe, the product of the electric and magnetic constants equals the inverse of the speed of light squared. Now let's imagine a universe where the speed of light is twice as fast. It's easy to see that the product of the electric and magnetic constants changes by a factor of 4 compared to our universe. This might not seem like a huge change, but keep in mind that these are fundamental cosmological constants, and that playing around with them even a little bit could potentially result in a universe that looks very different. So let's consider Hovind's universe, where the speed of light used to be, on average, 2.3 million times as fast as it is today. The product of the electric and magnetic constants is now different by a factor of well over 5 trillion. Well done, Kent. You've just invented a universe that is completely inhospitable to life, and perhaps even completely devoid of structure. The consequences of this equation are catastrophic. It's describing a universe where the electric constant and/or the magnetic constant are ridiculously small. A minuscule magnetic constant will result in a universe where magnetic interactions are all but non-existent. Planets and moons won't have magnetic fields to shield them from incoming solar radiation, making them all inhospitable to life. But things get even worse with a minuscule electric constant. The electrostatic force would become so stupidly strong that nuclear fusion would never be able to take place, since nothing would be able to overcome the Coulomb barrier. This means that there won't be any stars in the universe, so the entire cosmos becomes dark. Not that there'd be much to illuminate in the first place, though. The electric repulsion of protons would be so ridiculously strong that the only atoms in existence would be hydrogen. Welcome to a universe based on creationist physics. And that's not even the half of it. These are Maxwell's equations. They tell us pretty much everything about electromagnetism. Do you notice anything familiar about these equations? That's right, Kent. These guys show up everywhere. These terms, which represent electric and magnetic fields, also depend on the electric and magnetic constants. In changing the speed of light, you are changing literally every equation in electromagnetism. And since electromagnetism is one of the 4 fundamental forces of nature, by changing the speed of light, you are changing 1/4 of all the forces in the universe. In order to even have any hope of making a universe that is both stable and has an average light speed that's millions of times greater than what we have, you need to change all of the other fundamental constants of nature, and in doing so, you're altering the other fundamental forces. In order to make creationism work, you do have to, quite literally, change all of the laws of physics. If you're allowed to change the laws of physics to make the universe 6,000 years old, then anybody is allowed to change the laws of physics to make the universe into whatever they want. So let's wrap this up. Given that there's no evidence that the speed of light has ever changed, and that a change in the speed of light to the extent that you propose would destroy the entire universe, how can we fix the starlight problem?
By assuming that speed of light is constant, guys, we have a solution. Based on a 200-year window out of a supposedly 13.8 billion year time frame, which is about 0.00000014492% of the total time frame, we can assume that speed of light is constant, and that is hard science. Now, next thing you have to do is use this impeccable criteria in your studies. Want to figure out what word thinks in your sociology study? Well, consider just 110 people. That will be enough. Want to know what 100 grams of cocaine does to your body? Just give a dose of 0.0000144927 grams, and well, you're done. Want to do a quality control? Well, pick a single product out of your product line for every 70 million products. And if that works, fine. You can be rest assured. If a child grew to a height of 2 inches last year, rest assured he will be 16 foot high. And if he gained 4 pounds last year, he will be a 400-pound giant. Hooray! The proposition is so absurd that only intellectuals can believe it. And considering how King Crocoduck, who does not even know what affirming the consequent is a physics graduate here to shatter the fables that credulous people believe, you might just have found the prophet. Now the next thing is to switch off the comedy for it is and gather yourself to really consider. No, not whether God exists. That is not that important. Consider how your education system has failed you and produced gems like King Crocoduck. Don't ask me, I have nothing to do with it. King Crocoduck might even be right. There might be some knowledge hidden from Kent and others that they believe in fables that is only known to top-notch scientists. But if that is so, why normal atheists are atheists? They are not top-notch scientists. They did not know about all this. The answer is authority. They accept it. That is why when Crocoduck throws sound bites at them which prove nothing, they grab it up. Crocoduck tries to make use of authority, yet his case is only a case in which he presents an equation which he won't tell how is valid, and then except for a variable related to age of Earth or age of Earth itself, tells his followers all the values preemptively. Put these values, he says, and you will arrive at the answer. Everything is set up, and none cares to ask whether what he is presenting is actually even valid. No one seems to know what these equations are, but in their mind they have disproved Kant and have a chance to mock fundamentalists. How ironic. They have already preformed beliefs, they just need a whiff of approval from a prophet in mask of science. Everybody gobbles the fact when Crocoduck says that the absolute magnitude of a Type 1 supernova is known. Or a single soul, perhaps, but someone buried deep in comments asks how we know the actual luminosity of an explosion supposedly billions of light years away. This is funny, because their prophet seems to be curious what absolute magnitude is too. This is the problem. The wise are unsure about the truth. The ignorant are too confident of lies. Hovind might be completely wrong. The world indeed may be 13.8 billions of years old, and we may have come from a soup secreted from a rock. But it does not disprove that men who believe from where they came become one with it. You can guess what I mean.